it's another thing that sort of makes the rounds at this time of year, for good and also maybe not for good, and at least for viral. And that is Christmas pageants, the good and the bad. So that's like
The good, the bad, and the spectacular.
and the spectacular camel, centric. So these things can get wild. But I do think like many people grow up. I mean, depending on maybe your church size and stuff, but like one of the traditions we have at Christmas is sort of these like nativity plays, these pageants. Like, like we just had ours. We went 2 days ago to see our church put on like their annual, big Christmas play. And I mean, like, there's a spectrum for this. There's very much the like, a bunch of crying kids in like towels as shepherds, and very homegrown. And then you can get like, like you have people riding in on real camels and like lights and like people ascending from the ceiling, and like, you can get some of these churches can get pretty crazy with this. I mean, I think because of the extreme crazy one, like the over the top spectacles, like those are the ones that tend to sort of dominate the conversation. Yeah, because those can very much go viral, and that has already been the case this year. You can find a lot of videos and stuff like on TikTok, and like people outside the church or just dissatisfied within the church, like calling to tax the church, like saying, no, clearly the church is not using all this money for
for benevolence.
Yeah. Like if they can afford to import some camels,
rent a camel,
then they should afford to pay taxes. But I thought we could just get into that a little bit of like things, because I feel like obviously like the specifics of just sort of the Christmas one, but I feel like even beyond that of just like sort of the role of these sort of performances, like, because I feel like at its heart is this sort of the question of like, how do we like, as the church be in this culture, like during these cultural moments and stuff, and like what is the most like effective or like, biblical or God honoring ways that we can kind of conduct ourselves and like present ourselves to, the culture around us. And is that a very high spectacle Christmas program, or is it not? Or is it somewhere kind of in the middle? But what are some of your initial thoughts just on these performances?
I think the fact that that I think everyone would say like, maybe like camels, like live camels in your performance is going too far. The fact that like I think most people can point to some instance of like, this is a church that maybe has gone, it's over the top, it's maybe too much, indicates, I think that we are okay with a certain amount of spectacle, and that there is sort of an upper bounds of how far you can go with something like a Christmas play. And I think most people would say that like Christmas pageants are good, and I think it's also kind of going back to our previous conversation on traditions. Like that is one of those things. It's like, I'm sure there are many churches who wouldn't dream of not putting on a Christmas play. Like some, obviously not every church does that, but like of the ones that do, I feel like it would be met with a lot of resistance if they were one year to say, you know what, we're just not going to do our annual Christmas play. Like I think there would be, riots, and like people would be very upset about that. But I think everyone recognizes that somewhere, is going too far. Where that is I think kind of the crux of the question.
Yeah, because I feel like if we can, if we can recognize that like, there's a line that is crossed, then like it's more just a question of like where that line is. Like obviously, like because like how do you navigate that then? Like if you recognize that you can definitely have too much of it, then like I feel like churches should evaluate like, so like, are we doing too much? Like how do we like it's clearly not all just anything goes, because we know that you can get carried away and it reflects poorly. And I do think that there's and I'll be honest, like I struggle somewhat with this. Like I have to guard my heart, and I feel like in many ways I'm like a self-contradiction with my views on some of these things, but because I feel like it is easy to be very cynical about these. Sort of because like churches spend a lot of money. I mean, again, the churches that do put on these relatively high quality like performance, like those kind of churches, like they do spend a lot of money on this, like time and resources, and like a lot of their emphasis at Christmas and stuff like is centered on sort of these performances, right? This is the big thing we do at Christmas time. And like there is a part that you can definitely approach with a cynical mindset of like is that really the best use of our resources? Like,
Right.
Like if we're thinking how can we sort of make the biggest impact in our community at Christmas? Like, you have a big performance with camels, or just a lot of lights and a lot of money, and bringing in artists and stuff, or like, or do we like pay the Christmas bills and buy kids toys and like do things like give outside of the church, and obviously like that's not necessarily like mutually excuse. You can do
Right.
both
Right.
Of those things, but there is a sense of just sort of like, is this really like, are we giving sort of the community the gift that they want, or is it really more about us? And
Is
like,
it the gift that the church wants to give,
yeah,
or is it the gift that the community is willing to receive? And I think that is. I mean, how you maybe frame the purpose of your Christmas pageant, I think probably tells a lot of where your heart is, what the church is thinking when it is putting on some of these things. And then also I just think it can be I think it can be tricky because Christmas pageants are kind of by nature just sort of a retelling of a church story, of a story that's very near and dear to church members' hearts. And so, is that the best vehicle? Like if the idea is that it's a really an evangelical sort of like, or evangelistic type of outreach, is that really the case when, it's very much a sort of a churchy language? It's all kind of doing a lot of things that are traditions within the church. I think you can kind of get some conflicting feelings about these things, and it's tough to know because you could draw that line kind of anywhere.
yeah, 'cause that is the sort of the because you can play that game with anything. Like you could say, hey, instead of all this money in a Christmas pageant, like why don't we go, pay the Christmas bill? Like would more, instead of spectacle and trying to convince people of the gospel of spectacle, like perhaps they'd be more convinced by just like practical acts of love in their own setting. Like,
Yeah.
But like you can also, why don't we meet in a tent and sell our building and like pay off the debts? Like,
Yeah.
or why, instead of having coffee available in the, foyer, like why don't we just use that money on coffee beans and like, send it to needy kids? Like you
Yeah.
can do that with a lot of things.
Right. Right.
That like at some point you can't really get into, like, or what, do we need all the fancy lights when we can worship? Like you can get carried away with some of that.
Yeah.
To where I feel like even the more cynical of like Christmas performances, like those types of people probably aren't consistent in a lot of ways. This is
Sure.
It's like the church shouldn't do this, but I still kind of like this thing over here we do, and
Yeah.
I think that's worth the the money. But I do think why this question, why I find it interesting is this like kind of the role of like sort of the arts or performances and like just spectacle to like is that really as effective as we think it is, and like or like to justify as much.
Yeah.
Because like, I'll be honest, like for me, like the perfect Christmas performance is like a reflection of the church body. Like I know, like, and I'm not saying my opinion is like the only opinion that can be had, but like I'm not as big of a fan of like bringing in a lot of other people from the outside of the church and like really focusing on like, just providing like, we're just trying to provide a big spectacle Christmas, big, like you would find out there, don't go to the Nutcracker, come see our church perform. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like the more powerful, which I know we're both huge, like Christmas Eve candlelight service. Like, to me, that's the most powerful service of the year.
Yeah.
Because it's usually sort of like the, like, I mean, like other people outside the church sometimes comes to those too, but it's sort of like simple. This is who we are. This is what we believe, and like we're singing. And I feel like to me, there's more like attractive power in that than just sort of putting on a bunch of spectacle and some of that. The other side though is like I do think like as someone that's very much like an advocate for the arts and stuff and the church, like I do think Christmas performances and stuff can be like the church should be kind of marshaling its artists and using them.
Yeah.
And like these sort of performances tend to give those opportunities to people that don't often get them throughout the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I like the maybe the idea of drawing that line to be like, not hiring outside performers to like glitz up your production. Um, I think in some ways that could be a very sensible approach to it. And again, like we're not um, like this isn't a problem I think that will be solved like in this segment of our podcast. But I think it is worth thinking about because it's like, yeah, I think it goes back to like, so what is it you're trying to achieve with a Christmas pageant? Like, and I think perhaps that is slightly different depending on the church that's doing it. And so I think based on that, maybe then you can start to look back and say, okay, is this, are we doing too much by like bringing in outside performers to like make this feel more professional and more polished, or to just to incorporate a certain element that we wouldn't have otherwise, or do we need to actually look at our members and say, okay, so based on who our members are, what kind of performance does this need to be? Like, what kind of pageant does this need to be based on the sort of talent that we have internally? And again, what is it you're trying to achieve with?
Yeah, and I feel like
this?
The movie that just came out last month was too early for a Christmas movie, but
Yeah.
now it's okay to. I think it's still in theaters.
Now you can recommend it.
The best Christmas pageant ever by director Dallas Jenkins of The Chosen fame. I feel like, I mean, a really good movie. I mean, the whole movie is about this conversation of like,
Yeah.
it's about a church. If you haven't seen the movie or read the original book, like, it's about like a church that is not even like a big church, but like they put on this performance, and it's it's sort of what they're known for, and it's all about this the highest quality and like the way they always do it, and then a bunch of like outside kids from the church sort of like hijack the performance and volunteer, and they're about like just rowdy kids, and the whole thing is like, can we still salvage this, and everyone's coming, and like, can we still salvage it without sort of the perfect performance, and like, and they don't know like the best way to react or say things, and like the whole like the takeaway from the movie is like it becomes the best Christmas pageant ever because there's like an authenticity that sort of cuts through some of the spectacle and the familiar stuff, and
Yeah.
it's like there's sort of like a beauty and just sort of a bit more like, hey, it's not quite as polished, but it's clearly like this is sort of who this community is and these people, and like a more honest reaction. Like I just feel like Christians can like, I'm all for the arts and performances and doing that. Like I just think we can put too much of our faith in like spectacle and thinking like, well, like if we can tell them the gospel story, but like if they see it lived out with some camels on stage, like or just very elaborate lights and things, like,
Yeah.
then it's really gonna sink in, like that sort of the extra spectacle that we don't have throughout the rest of the year, like that's what convinces people, as opposed to like maybe just sort of that honest, like from the heart, sort of raw. This is who we are. We're just sharing our like. Maybe
Yeah.
that's actually at a deeper level more compelling to people than because like there's a lot of spectacle out there. Like
Yeah.
I feel like if the church can't compete, like like we can't go toe to toe with like the world for that kind of stuff. Like just providing like even the best like church performances and stuff. Like there's still other options out there that are like people are used to spectacle, but like what we can provide is like the more like honest spiritual. So I don't know, like I every year I kind of go back and forth. I always enjoy our church's performance and just other these types of things.
Yeah.
There is a part of me that just wonders, like, at least recognizes like there is a danger in a line, and like whether we cross it every year or not is a different discussion, but like just like at least be aware, like what are we trying to accomplish, and like is the focus more on like us and how we look and presenting this, or are we really like using our resources wisely at Christmas time to like bless and give a gift to people
Yeah.
in the community. But another thing.